What if I told you that the chaos in Las Vegas was so severe that Lewis Hamilton was forced to speak out after a safety failure that the governing body should have prevented long before FP2 even began? You saw the red flag on television, but what you did not see was the truth. A manhole structure beneath the cars was moving under full load, the exact type of failure that had already caused a major incident in this same city 2 years earlier. And while officials insisted everything was under control, Hamilton was inside a Ferrari SF25 that could not warm its tires, losing grip corner after corner before facing a frightening high-speed close call with Nico Hülkenberg that exposed how dangerous the situation truly was. Stay right here, because once you hear the words Hamilton used after stepping out of the car and why his criticism struck directly at the heart of the governing body's decision-making, you will understand why Las Vegas 2025 became the most alarming practice session of the entire season. The second practice session in Las Vegas began under a cold desert atmosphere that turned the entire circuit into a surface with almost no natural grip. The temperature of the asphalt dropped so quickly that teams struggled to maintain tire energy from the moment cars left the pit lane. Lewis Hamilton rolled out onto a track that felt unprepared for high-speed running, with the Ferrari SF25 refusing to generate the tire warmth needed to stabilize its balance. The first laps were filled with corrections, small slides, and a sense of unpredictability that immediately signaled that this session was going to be more about survival than performance. As the laps continued, the conditions revealed how fragile the surface was on this street layout. The tires became colder on the straights than they did in the corners, and this caused the front end of Hamilton's car to feel disconnected at the moment he needed precision. Engineers observed abrupt shifts in grip levels that had no consistent pattern from one sector to the next. The SF25 behaved as though the tires were falling below their thermal threshold on every lap, and Hamilton voiced frustration as he tried to extract direction from a car that gave him no reliable feedback. The rhythm needed to build competitive pace simply did not exist. Then came the incident that changed the tone of the night. Marshals positioned near a high-speed zone noticed that a manhole structure was behaving suspiciously when cars passed over it at full load. This triggered the first red flag and immediate concern, because Las Vegas had already experienced a similar structural failure 2 seasons earlier. The governing body conducted a quick inspection and declared the surface safe to resume. But many inside the paddock were uneasy. A short static check in freezing conditions could not replicate the immense downforce of a modern ground effect car, and the speed of the restart raised questions about whether the situation had been fully understood. When the session resumed with only minutes remaining, Hamilton attempted to push again, but the tires refused to climb into their optimal window. The car slid through medium-speed sections, lost bite on initial turn-in, and became increasingly difficult to manage. He needed consecutive laps to warm the rubber, but the time pressure forced him to accelerate the warm-up process, which only degraded the limited stability he had. The Ferrari felt unpredictable, as though every attempt to build confidence was countered by the environment. It was clear that the car was not responding, and that the track was not offering the consistency required for meaningful testing. Moments later, the situation escalated dramatically. Personnel stationed at the same manhole observed clear movement under the cars that passed at speed, indicating that the earlier inspection had not captured the full danger. The governing body deployed a second red flag, and the session was terminated. For Hamilton, this revelation was infuriating. Drivers had been pushing in freezing conditions over a surface that was not fully stable. The idea that the structure had been cleared moments earlier only deepened the sense of frustration. Every driver depends on trust in the track, and that trust was shaken the instant the truth behind the second red flag became known. The central problem that exploded during FP2 in Las Vegas was not simply the brutal cold or the lack of grip. It was the realization that the track surface itself could not be trusted at the exact moment teams needed it most. Lewis Hamilton entered the session prepared for a difficult night, but the first laps made it clear that this would be far worse than a typical low-temperature struggle. The tires on the Ferrari SF25 refused to generate heat, and without thermal energy, the entire aerodynamic platform collapsed. Each corner demanded corrections, and each correction exposed instability that Hamilton could not tune out. What should have been a structured preparation window became an unpredictable fight for basic control. Drivers quickly understood that grip was not merely inconsistent, it was vanishing unpredictably. The asphalt created sudden changes in adhesion that made it impossible to identify a reliable performance pattern. Hamilton reported that the front end felt numb through early steering input, only for the rear to slide minutes later as the tires cooled further on the straights. Telemetry confirmed that the tires were dropping below their operating threshold almost immediately, leaving the SF25 without the load support it requires to stabilize itself. With a car so dependent on tire temperature, every lap felt worse than the one before. The first red flag changed everything. Officials stopped the session because a marshal noticed abnormal behavior from a manhole structure in a high-speed zone. The governing body conducted a quick inspection and declared the track safe, but the short duration of the evaluation did not reassure the drivers. Las Vegas had already suffered a structural failure of this kind 2 seasons earlier, and many inside the paddock questioned whether a rapid check could reliably simulate the intense downward forces generated by a modern ground effect car. The tension grew quietly because everyone knew that structural issues do not disappear simply because time is short. Once cars were released again, Hamilton attempted to salvage what was left of the session, but the Ferrari still refused to behave. The tires did not retain heat during the warm-up lap, the balance changed through every sector, and the car seemed to reset itself each time he attempted to build momentum. He needed multiple consecutive laps to stabilize the tires, but the limited time available made that impossible. The SF25 remained cold, reactive, and unstable, and Hamilton's feedback became increasingly urgent as he realized that the window to understand the car was closing. The second red flag confirmed the worst fears. Personnel stationed near the same manhole reported visible movement when cars passed at speed, proving that the earlier inspection had not captured the full danger. Drivers had been pushing through one of the coldest sessions of the season over a surface that was not completely secure. The governing body had declared the area safe only minutes earlier, yet the danger resurfaced under real load. For Hamilton, who was already struggling with tire temperature and balance, this revelation brought frustration and genuine concern. The track had failed to meet the basic expectation of structural stability. By the end of the night, Hamilton left the garage with nothing he needed to prepare for the weekend ahead. He had no clean laps, no meaningful temperature data, and no understanding of how the SF25 would behave once the conditions dropped even further. His criticism of the situation came from the belief that the combination of track instability, rushed decisions, and extreme temperatures had taken away his opportunity to prepare. And it poses a clear question. If you were driving a car that refuses to warm its tires while the surface beneath you shows signs of movement, would you trust the decisions that allowed the session to continue? Or would you feel that the night had crossed a line that should never be crossed in Formula One? The engineering challenge Ferrari faced in Las Vegas during FP2 pushed the SF25 into one of the most fragile operational states of its entire season. The car depends heavily on building tire temperature to stabilize the aerodynamic platform, but the freezing desert air stripped energy from the rubber almost instantly. Each time Hamilton attempted to generate heat, the tires cooled again on the long straights, leaving him with a balance that never settled. Engineers watched the live telemetry and saw tire core temperatures fall lap after lap, confirming that the SF25 had entered a thermal deficit it could not recover from under those conditions. Without heat, there was no downforce stability, and without downforce stability, the car behaved like it was floating above the surface. Ferrari attempted to counter the problem with targeted adjustments. They increased brake energy to warm the tires, modified the differential to retain traction, and altered electrical deployment to create additional load. Yet none of these changes produced sustainable improvement because the circuit absorbed heat faster than the tires could generate it. The aerodynamic concept of the SF25 is built around a precise ride height window, but cold conditions forced Ferrari to run slightly higher than ideal to protect the floor. That small change altered airflow beneath the car and weakened the downforce seal, creating imbalance that Hamilton felt as he entered and exited medium speed corners. Every modification offered a short burst of stability, followed by another drop in temperature. The first red flag, caused by concerns over a manhole structure, made the engineering situation even worse. During the stoppage, the tires cooled to near minimum thresholds, and once Hamilton returned to the track, the SF25 required multiple laps to rebuild temperature that simply would not accumulate. He needed a long, uninterrupted sequence to awaken the aerodynamic platform, but time was limited and pressure was rising. Ferrari's data stream showed that the car could not hold heat long enough to create a consistent grip profile, meaning the engineers could not determine whether balance problems came from a setup, the cold track, or the unstable surface itself. The The second red flag destroyed any remaining opportunity to understand the car. When personnel confirmed that the manhole had shifted again under load, the session was immediately stopped. For Ferrari, this meant the loss of the only remaining window where they could have analyzed the behavior of the SF25 at representative speeds. The aerodynamic load that engineers needed to evaluate was never captured. The mechanical response in the slower corners was never stabilized. And the tire temperature cycle, which is essential for Ferrari's predictive models, never formed. In engineering terms, the session yielded almost no usable data, creating a vacuum where precision was required most.